Afternoon, good morning from the West Coast, and good day from the rest of the world. Welcome to the first of our four-part series, the 4 Pillars of Project Leadership. We're going to start off today by introducing you to the 4 pillars, and then we're going to focus in on the first one. Our next session coming up on July the 10th. You'll, of course, be receiving an invite as soon as we're done here today. The next session on July the 10th, we'll be taking a look at the next pillar, and then one in August, and finishing out in September. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We've got a great audience today, and we'll get right to it. As always, our host today, we have Lauren on the technical side, so if you do have any questions, comments, thoughts, if you're having any technical difficulties, please fire Lauren a note or just hop into the questions box and text her. We'll do what we can. From a sound and technology perspective, keep in mind that sometimes the audio gets a little bit out of sync with the video, and usually if you just bear with it for a few moments, it seems to clear itself up and catch up. We will be running a video today, partway through, so fingers crossed it streams well for you. I picked one actually that should work fine. You have your control panel off to the right. As always, there's a little red arrow you can click to push it aside, minimize it, give yourself a little bit more real estate. If you click on the little blue box with the square there, it pops open the question box window. You can ask a question, that sort of thing. And then, of course, you can raise your hand if you have any issues or concerns. As with all of our webinars, we'll be polling you and asking you questions throughout. So when you see this icon, it's time for you to put your input in. I will put my contact information up at the end of the session, so if you do want to email me or give me a call to follow up, happy to receive those. So we're going to do our opening thought today, and we're going to do this slightly different than we've normally been doing. Because this is the first of our 4 series, we're going to do an opening thought for leadership in general, in terms of leadership within projects, and then we're going to have a second opening thought which will actually cover this one pillar. So this session is a session I've actually put together for some other customers and clients. We actually delivered it for Project World about, was it last week before? Went great, fabulous, by the way. Shout out to Project World if you're interested. It's a good couple-day conference here in Toronto. So here's our opening thought around leadership. And I took this from a book called Crucial Conversations. Now, Crucial Conversations, it's a fabulous book. It started out as a research project where a team of researchers wanted to find what were the winning processes that, kind of differentiated those companies that were really good versus the ones that were kind of, second place. And in their research, they very quickly discovered that it actually was not the processes themselves, but it was the people and the execution of those processes. So this quote comes from very early in the book. High-performance companies result more from employees mastering crucial conversations than from high-performance management systems. And the performance management systems that we're talking about here are your processes. Now, this kind of flies in the face a little bit of PMI and PMBOK and this very heavy processy thing that we tend to get our certifications for. And really, it's not contrary to that, it's actually in support of it, because what they found was for these high-performing companies, the processes were there. They did have processes, but the processes were differentiating the high performers from the also-rans. So when we want to up our game, when it comes to running projects and doing a really good job here, we need to up our game on the on the conversation side, on the execution of those processes. And this book in particular, I particularly like because, as its title implies, crucial conversations. And when we think about what we do as project managers, 80–90% of what we do and where our biggest success factors are around having those crucial conversations, having those difficult conversations. And the crucial conversations they're talking about in this book are those difficult ones where you've got to, go talk to your boss about a topic you don't want to, or you've got to talk to a team member on your project team who's maybe underperforming, or we've got, you know, a difficult thing, and it's that classic pit in your stomach feeling of, I have to have this conversation, I don't want to. So I do recommend this book, and, you know, pick it up. It's a great book, and I think is really applicable in the project world in that sort of general leadership sense. Now, we're going to focus in on our first pillar, and our first pillar is around awareness. And I've got a slide coming up with the 4 pillars. So let's just do our opening thought around pillar 1. The less we know about something, the more certain we are that we know it all. We don't even question our own behavior. Now, when I was preparing this session, and when I started to build this 4-pillar model, the first one for me was obvious: awareness. Without this awareness, if we don't know where we are, what we're doing, you know, what our situation is, we're not going to be effective. And one of the classic experiments that has been done, and this was done, I forget the first time it was done, but it was done like 100 years ago, it's called the pike syndrome. So here's how this experiment worked. They had a pike, which is a very ferocious carnivorous fish, and it's really known as a hunter. So they had this pike in a fish tank, and if you put some minnows in the fish tank with the pike will go and eat them. That's what pikes do, right? It's a very fast fish. It's a very aggressive fish. It zips right in and grabs these minnows. So what they did for the experiment is they put a glass divider in to prevent the pike from being able to get to the minnows. Now, when you're underwater and there's a piece of glass separating you and the other half of the tank, you can't see this glass. It becomes invisible. So the pike was unaware of the barrier that was there. And they put minnows on the other side of the barrier, and of course the pike does what pike do, which is it attacked the minnows. But of course it hit the barrier and was unable to get to them. So they left it this for a while, and eventually the pike stopped attacking. Right? So it basically kind of said, okay, I can't get to those minnows that are over there, so I'm going to stop bothering. Kind of hurt my nose here as I bounce off this invisible barrier that I can't see. So they waited until the pike finished or stopped, gave up in effect. Then they took the barrier away. Now, when you take the barrier away in this scenario, in this experiment, the minnows are now free to swim through the entire tank, and they in fact can swim up to and past the pike. And what they found was the pike just laid there. It just sat there and it let the minnows swam by. So it basically had restructured its perception of the world and saying, I can't get to those minnows. And the experiment was recreated, I think, in the 70s, and I'm saying that because if you watch the video, hairstyles and clothes and so forth, it's got a very sort of 70s feel to it. Unfortunately, the link to the original content is no longer valid, so I couldn't get the proper details behind it. But if you watch this video, you'll see them take the pike in the tank, they put the minnows in, they eat them. They put in a glass jar, they put minnows inside, the pike attempts to take them, and then they take the glass jar out and the pike does not eat the minnows. In fact, and they've replicated this experiment, what happens is the pike actually dies of starvation even though there's food all around it. And the point of this is when we've got this perception of our world and we don't question that and we're not aware of really what's going on, we can, you know, literally starve to death, as happened in the pike experiment. Okay, so let's introduce you to the 4 pillars. Now, the idea behind this 4-pillar model is to look at what's the basic things that we need from a leadership perspective to run our projects. We have an excellent process reference, PMBOK. We've got all the bits and pieces there. The technical aspects are well known. We now need to up our game. If we really want to up our game, what we need to do is the application of those. So we've got these 4 pillars: awareness, culture, objective evaluation, and focus. And I kind of developed this model about a year and a half ago, I guess now, and I've been applying it and kind of, you know, analyzing it, and it's really kind of holding true. So I'm pretty happy with how this is going. So let's focus in on the awareness piece. And I'm going to pose a question for you. Have you ever had a project sneak up on you? And by sneak up on you, I mean you kind of thought things were going well, and then they, you know, kind of at the last minute they didn't, or you're kind of rolling along in the project and things were happening, and you start to get that whole sense of, yeah, things aren't quite right here. So let's just have a quick little poll on this. And we've got 23% voted. So we'll get to about 70% voted, and we'll close the voting. We're about 45% voted. You guys are coming in fast. This is great. Love it. Yes, the Fast and Furious. I think what's the Fast and Furious up to? So Fast and Furious 7 now, is it? Fast and Furious 23? I don't know. All right. 73 voted, so we'll give it another couple seconds. 74 voted. Okay. There we go. So 75% voted. Let's see those results. Wow. 96% said yes. So I would like to first of all thank you for your honesty, because I know that can sometimes be a difficult thing to say, to really ask yourself and admit, I've had projects sneak up on me, but that's all part of the learning curve. So I'm going to hire the 4% who said no, or maybe we'll avoid the 4% who said no because maybe we're not being honest. I'm not really sure yet. But yeah, so we've all had this happen. I've had this happen where the project kind of sneaks up on you, and you thought things were going along well. And I contend that this is really where awareness is going to kind of really help us out, because if we can build our awareness, if we can be more aware of our environment and what's going on, we can do a much better job of seeing those things that are coming down the pipe towards us, or down the pipe towards us. Okay. Just sorry, a bit of awareness here. I'm aware of our sometimes limited bandwidth, so I'm just going to turn my webcam off for now, and I'll turn that on again later. So we're going to go to our second question now, which is, are you smarter than a frog? So go ahead and we'll open that poll and see who's smarter than a frog. All right, so we're getting votes coming in. Okay, I know this is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek question, but I do appreciate you participating. Wow, look at you guys, the Fast and Furious coming. We're already at 71% here. All right, so we're going to pop up in those results, and we have 79% said you're smarter than a frog, and 21% said no. I'm very curious. Okay, I was expecting that it was going to be like 100%, 99% said yes, I'm smarter than a frog. So using your question box, I'd really love to hear from some of the people who said no, I'm not smarter than a frog, why you said that. Yeah, okay, that's just making me curious now. All right, so why did I pose this question? Well, there's the parable, and so I'm just going to continue on with this. And those of you who said no, pop in. Instinctive Canadian humility. I love it, Sarah. Thank you so much. That's awesome. I'm going to so be using that in the future. All right. So some of you may be aware of this parable. There's the story of an experiment that was done many years ago. It's actually about 150, 170 years ago now. Where they put a frog into a beaker of water, and they very slowly heated the water. And the basic question was, will the frog jump out of the water before the temperature gets so hot that that they would, literally cook and die? So now, why frogs? Well, we use frogs because frogs are exothermic, and in an exothermic animal, they are the same temperature as their environment. So a frog in cold water, it'll be cold. A frog in hot water will be hot. So its temperature actually goes with the environment. And of course, the issue is if you get too hot, then it's going to cook. So they wanted an animal that was very in tune with its environment. So in 1869 was when the experiment was first done by actually a German psychologist, Friedrich Goltz. And he basically put a frog into a thing of water, very slowly heated the water, and the frog did not jump out, and it in fact cooked. Now, the problem with this experiment, though, and this has become kind of a parable of, when you have an environment that slowly changes, we might not be aware of those changes until it's too late. Now, the problem with the original experiment, however, is that the purpose of the experiment was to search for the location of the soul. So what the German psychiatrist had done is he'd actually removed the brain. So, and I think it's pretty obvious, and if you've done any kind of anatomy class anywhere, or just, slight awareness, if you remove a creature's brain, it's not going to jump out of the water. Now, apparently the experiment was duplicated in 1872 and 1875, confirming the results without removing the brains, apparently. But modern science, they have tried to duplicate this and basically have found that, no, if you put a frog in water and start heating it up, even if you heat it up very slowly, it will jump out. So how does this apply to us as project managers? Well, we're the frog in this pot of water. And the water's nice and cool. It's right where we want it to be. We're buzzing along in our project. And then things start to get hotter, right? So, we're starting to go off the rails. And what can happen is if this happens fairly slowly, we can get ourselves into trouble by simply not adjusting to our environment. Okay, so we have another response to why I'm not any smarter than a frog, because I'm not smarter than a frog because I don't have its survival skills. I love it, and I love that you use the word survival skills, so thanks very much, Daria, for that one. Yeah, because, and it's almost like we're so smart we're dumb sometimes, right? Because we get into this scenario where we think we know it all. We start to get into that whole, you rationalize it out, you justify it, you think it through too much. And and I'm guilty as charged. You overthink things, and then you kind of look back and go, well, duh, maybe a little bit of basic common sense. So the survival skills, absolutely. All right, so we're going to do a quick little test of your awareness. So here's the video piece that we're going to play. So we're going to play a really quick little 2-minute whodunit video, and like all good whodunits, it's really about your observational skills. Oh, and sorry, just before I do that, Jamie just popped in. How do I see others' comments or questions? Unfortunately, Jamie, our software doesn't allow that. So any questions or comments that come in, I'll read them off and share them. Okay. So we're going to watch this quick little whodunit video. And of course, this is really about testing your skills and powers of observation.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you? Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
All right. So a couple of comments coming in. I love the first one from Sarah. I'm thinking that you made this comment, Sarah, during the video. She says, "What happened to the stuffed bear?" So off to the right, there was a stuffed bear behind the maid who turned into, or who switched and turned into a suit of armor. Yep, thanks, Sarah, for that confirmation. Yeah, Mark saying awesome. It's a great video, and in fact, this is actually, there's a couple of different ones that the London Transport put out. They went on a program a couple of years ago to increase road safety, and basically wanted people to raise their awareness and look for cyclists. So they're having a big problem with cyclists and vehicle accidents, and wanted to kind of raise that awareness. Now, coming from a cyclist, I can relate, absolutely. Now, the concept here is actually twofold. And the first concept that this really is talking about is a concept called channelized channelized attention. And now the brain is a self-limiting mechanism, right? It's designed not to get overloaded. So when you start to get overloaded, what you tend to do is you tend to focus in on key points. And this was really kind of first brought to light by Dr. Edward de Bono in '91 through his book called Lateral Thinking. Fabulous book, by the way. Now, the concept of channelized attention basically is you kind of focus in on that one piece. Now, there's a second element here, which is expectancy, which is you see what you expect to see. So when you're driving and you do that over the shoulder check, you're looking for a car because you're about to change lanes. Well, are you also looking for a cyclist? So when we don't see what we expect, our brain tends to process that as we don't see anything, right? Now, the concept here relating back to projects is we want to raise our awareness. So we want to really kind of step back from that tight in focus view and look at the kind of bigger, wider view. And you notice when the first half of the video played, there was that tight in focus view, which is often the lens that we use when we are executing our projects. Now, when you step back and you look at the bigger, wider view, you start to see all of those changes that were happening during the actual scene that was being filmed. So we want to really kind of take that step back and have that big picture view. And this is especially problematic in those small projects where, we're the project manager, we've got a team of maybe 2 or 3 people, we're also rolling up our sleeves and doing the work. So as I've always said, when you roll up the sleeves and become a doer, your project is now adrift. Now that's actually okay. We just need to be aware of it, and we need to balance that with disconnecting from the doer role and putting on our project manager hat and making sure that the overall project is executing as it should. So looking at awareness, it starts with the self. It starts with your own self-awareness. And there's really multiple levels here because we're going to layer on top of our self-awareness, awareness of the team. So how is the team doing? Now, as a team member, I can be very selfish. I can be very, I'm just going to focus in on myself. I'm going to focus in on my own work and how I'm doing. And if my other teammates aren't doing as well, I can afford to be a little bit selfish there. As a project manager, however, we need to increase our awareness. We need to increase our circle of awareness and say, I need to look just beyond myself and really take a look at, how is my team doing? But really that's not enough. We also have to take a look at it from an organizational perspective. So not only is how is the team doing, but how is the organization doing? What are the other projects that are out there? What are the other things that are going on? Are we facing a business process reengineering? Are we moving into a restructuring, of the organization? I remember being in for teaching a 5-day class to one large organization, and while I was there, literally, they were going through a reorg, and people were stepping out of the class to go to these mandatory meetings for 10 minutes, and basically they were being told whether they had a job or not. And there was a couple of big projects on the go, and one of my students comes back and he's like, well, this is great, I just lost half my team, right? So having that larger, greater awareness, what's happening at the organizational level, and of course the organization exists within that larger environment. So what's happening within the larger environment? What are some of the regulations that are coming down? What are some of the industry trends that are happening? Some of the market trends. So if we're in a for-profit organization, perhaps we're heading towards a market crash, or there's a downturn or an upturn in the industry. What does that look like, and how will that impact me within my project? Now, I'm not suggesting that you can have influence over your organization or influence over your environment. You can have influence over your team. That's why we're here, right? We're project managers. But understanding what's going on in that larger picture, we can anticipate, we can see what's coming down the pike for us, and we can, be prepared for that. We can, start to set things up. So we're going to go visit our friend the frog again. I love that you said one of the comments back was I don't have the skills. I don't have the survival skills of a frog. So let's start to think about that. What are some of the survival skills that we have? So I'm going to pose the question, how can we raise our awareness? What can we do tangibly that will help us become more aware of our project environment and what's going on? So you can just pop into your question box there and type in what are some of the things that you either do now or, in thinking about it, would like to start doing. Okay, so our first response back. Listen more than you speak, from Sarah. Beautiful, I love that one. There's an age-old expression, which is you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that perspective, or use them in that ratio, absolutely. You know, I think listening is highly underrated, and especially as A-type personalities who like to talk, and guilty as charged. All right, getting proper project scope from Peter, yes, absolutely. And you know, we can actually layer that with some of the listening piece as well, absolutely. What else do we got in here? Proper scope, network within the organization, from Menez, I guess. Sorry if I got your name wrong. Absolutely, you know, knowing your team, knowing the people that are out there. You know, if you do some good, effective networking, that can really help raise awareness of the team or of the organization environment, what's going on, you know, what's coming down the pike for you, and that kind of thing. Asking questions, beautiful, love it, thanks Christine. Try to understand others, what others have on their plate, from Harry, yes, absolutely. One of the biggest things you can do is, you know, get that awareness of what's going on for other people and their perspective. Ask other colleagues, from Daria. Love that one, and that can, you know, range from asking other PMs, asking other team members, just asking those questions, and absolutely. Enhance our communications methods, so being better at communicating, and from Sean, and that, lots of ways we can do that, and the most simple of which is, you know, shut up and listen, like Sarah said, right? Step away to gain perspective, from Reg. Love that one, Reg, thank you so much. This is exactly what we saw in the second half of that video, where instead of having that tight in focus lens, we step back to gain that larger perspective. And I mean, it's the embodiment of that old expression, you couldn't see the forest for the trees. You know, when you're down in the weeds and down in those details, it can be very easy to lose that larger perspective. So some fabulous answers here, guys. Stay up to date on organizational news, yep, and that can be quite challenging, can't it, right? Because we're already, you know, challenged for time and resources, etc. Keep an eye out for scope creep and document those changes, absolutely, Mahesh. There's another expression that I really love, which is identify problems when they're small, they're easy to fix. They're hard to identify, but they're easy to fix, because if you wait till they're big, they're easy to see, but hard to fix, yeah. Maintain your different communication channels, from David. I'd be interested, David, to hear an expansion of that. What do you mean by different communication channels? Because we talked to communication channels, things like, you know, email and status reports and things like that, but I'd be interested to hear your take on that. Understanding the org chart, and Daria, again, yes, beautiful. Communicate, ask more questions, from a different Dave. We have a couple different Daves on our call today. Historical information, yes, absolutely. Request a fresh eyes view, from Reg, you know, and that's just an expansion of taking that step back and looking from that different perspective. I remember, and it was a very small, minor problem. I was asked to kind of step in to help out an associate who was a technical problem with a printer, and he was just beside himself. He was just like, he couldn't even think straight. And I just said, you know what, step away. Just, you know, let me go look at it with fresh eyes. It took me about 30 seconds to fix it. But having that third party, that from the balcony, the not involved perspective, and coming in from a fresh set of eyes, you know, can be really, really good. From Stephanie, being transparent and getting advice from different PMs, other team members, beautiful, love it. Oh, here's a nice one. Thank you, Sean. Remove bias and understand the team culture and how they prefer to share information. Yes, fabulous. Just, you know, having that, removing the bias, looking at it from how they want to work. One of the programs that we do includes a behavioral model called DISC, D-I-S-C. And the entire essence of DISC is all about the platinum rule. Now, we all know the golden rule, right? Do unto others how you want to be done unto. The platinum rule, however, is do unto others how they want to be done unto. So basically, you become a bit of a chameleon and you adjust your way to meet how they want to be worked with and that kind of thing. Okay, so we got a thing from David on the expansion of the improve our communications channels. Different stakeholders, different people, different levels of organization, both horizontal, both vertical, absolutely. We can also expand that out a little bit because you can use different channels, such as I've got my formal channels where I've got the status report, I've got the formal communications, the specific emails that are going out, that sort of thing. But I also want to engage those informal channels, as I call them, the water cooler status report. I've always been amazed at how much more information and how much more truth I often get when I just have that quiet chat with people, you know, over a coffee or, you know, or literally at the water cooler. You know, just you know, having that kind of, you know, one-to-one quiet chats, not the official, not on the record, you know, to allow people to express concerns and to discuss things without them officially being on the record. Now, keeping in mind, of course, is we still need to get important data on the record. So this can be a great way to find out what the data really is and then work with that stakeholder to find a way to document that data officially on the record in a way that is, you know, palatable and acceptable and so forth. And this really is a way of helping us to bring in the whole, you know, we want to get that information out there, but we also don't want to look punitive and you know, sort of blaming. And there was one earlier that I didn't get to, which was separate the people from the issue. So separate the personal from the issue. And this can be a really great way to enable us to do that because we have that conversation. We have that you know, crucial conversation, that difficult conversation, where, you know, we discuss the issues that are there and help people separate them from, you know, the person from the issue and so forth, right? From Lisa, a great one, be inclusive and not restrictive. There's a lot of stuff in the leadership world right now around this whole concept of tribe and being part of the tribe. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, I know I have, is you sort of cut out of the loop. And you know that there's things going on, there's discussions happening, and you're not part of that discussion. It's a really crappy feeling. You know, so being that inclusive. And a book that I just recently read, Leadership is Half the Story, their take on buy-in, which I'm really liking. It's not about buy-in, it's about join in. So if you can get people joining in and talking and participating, that's what's going to lead to that buy-in. So kind of building on what Lisa said, which is, you know, being inclusive and not restrictive. And then a final comment from Sean, linked to removing biases, embrace diversity of thoughts and ideas. Absolutely. Huge fan of that whole embrace the you know, counterintuitive, the other thoughts and those other ideas. And this really ties back to our Pike syndrome comment, where the less we know, the more certain we are we know it. You know, so and this is a personal bias of mine that I tend to lean towards, is I think I know everything, right? I joke with my wife that I'm always right, or sorry, that I know everything. She's always right, but I know everything. But we need to really embrace that diverse opinion and you know, that other side of thing. And I just got a compliment from Menez. He says, "Brave man." So, okay. So some great stuff here, and it's, you know, when we look at, you know, what can we do to raise awareness, a lot of it is to really just kind of step back, look, observe, gather that information, not filter the information, not you know, judge the information, but just kind of let it come in. Now, we do also need to process that information, absolutely. So when we put this back into the project context, we have lots of technical, processy type tools to do this, right? So when we look at all of this, you know, we've got our work. Oops, what the heck happened there? Oh, I wanted to draw. There we go. We've got our work breakdown structure, you know, which leads to our network diagrams. And then, of course, we take our network diagrams and we put them into the Gantt chart farm. We take the dollars of each individual items, we carry those down, and those become our S-curve. And of course, our S-curve expands into the product life, and we've got all this very technical data happening. But are we really reading that data, and are we understanding that data, and are we internalizing it, right? And to me, this is really the essence when we talk in terms of awareness. Is I might have all of the numbers, but do I understand the numbers, right? And I remember very vividly an incident. I'm going to call it an incident. Very early in my working life, I was fresh out of school. I was actually working for my brother at the time. My brother's 5 years older. And I was working for my brother at the time. And I was kind of the computer expert in the area. So the steward had asked me to put together a spreadsheet with some costings of stuff, and I forget exactly what it was. And I put all this together, and I had some nice fancy formulas in there, and I calculated it. I said, here it is. And he took a look at it. Now, he'd started the business 5 years earlier and had been running it for years. And he took one look at it and he says, this isn't right. I said, yes, it is. I said, no, it's not. The numbers aren't right. And sure enough, they weren't right. My formula was off. But because I had created something technical, because I had a process involved, because the computer generated the numbers, right, I blindly followed them, right? So I had very low awareness. And I remember walking away from that experience and reflecting and thinking, wow, I really got to be careful that, I need to take a look at those numbers and say, does it make sense? And something that's been added into the latest version of PMBOK, which I'm really happy about seeing, is the DIKW model. And if you want to read up about this, go to PMBOK 5th edition, Appendix X1.5, X1.5. And the data information knowledge wisdom model, it's all about data process or data flow. So data is this raw data that comes in. So when we get a status report and we say, this work package is 50% done or 70% done, or I've spent this many hours or dollars on something, that's raw data. When we take that raw data and we put it into the context of our project plan, it becomes information. Now, information becomes knowledge, knowledge becomes wisdom, and basically wisdom is the interpretation, the awareness, the do I understand that data. So I'm going to present you a real quick little scenario for those of you who have been on previous webinars, especially the Earned Value Management one. You might recognize this. So here's our project. We're going to build 10 widgets, 10 weeks, $10,000. Our status is week 3, $2,500. Now, if we assume a linear flow, we're looking at one widget per week, $1,000 a widget. So week 3, we're thinking, okay, $3,000, $2,500. I'm actually in good shape here, right? This is I'm under budget. I'm $500 under budget. Life is good. We can continue on, right? Well, I asked you the question earlier of have you ever had a project sneak up on you? And again, thank you for your honesty. It was what 96% said yes. Well, here's the full status. We've only built 2 widgets. Now, what's very interesting with this scenario, and I use this in my classes a lot, is I'll give people this scenario, and I'll say, 10 weeks, 10 widgets, $10,000. We're at week 3, 2 widgets, $2,500. And everyone always, I haven't had anyone get it wrong yet. Everyone always says, oh, we're bad. We're behind schedule. We should have had 3 widgets, but we're over budget. We've built 2 widgets. There's $2,500, right? And then I cover up, and so we have this discussion around earned value, and we look at running the technical processy stuff, and then I back up and I say, okay, week 3, $2,500, how are we doing? And I'm amazed at the number of people who still, after looking at it, come back and say, oh, we're under budget. Meanwhile, the scenario hasn't changed. What I've done is I've reduced your awareness because I took away a key piece of data. So I really need to, you really need to think about what does the data mean. What do those numbers mean? And not just kind of blindly run them through formulas, right? And really kind of step back and kind of put that in that logical terms, right? Okay. So, teaching a class this week, Tuesday, chatting with a student on break, and she shared this. This is an actual experience. This actually happened. she was working, it was in university, she's working at the university bookstore, and the cashier working beside her turns to her and says, do you have 9 $100 bills? Okay, so you can just picture yourself. You're working at a university bookstore. You're standing there at your cash. Your coworker beside you turns to you and says, "You have 9 $100 bills." And then she says, "I need to give a customer change." Now, stock photo, not the actual people involved. So, just yeah. But let's think about this for a second. Yeah, you're in a university bookstore. You've got university kids, university students who are coming, who are paying for their purchases. If I'm providing change, it's a cash transaction. So this person has walked up and put a bill on the table and go to buy a book or two. This means if you need $900 worth of change, that means that person put down a $1,000 bill and bought something worth less than $100. So they're probably buying a $20 book, maybe a $30 book or whatever. So my first question is there a $1,000 bill? I think there probably is. I don't think it's necessarily in common circulation, and I highly doubt that a university student would be using a $1,000 bill to purchase a book in a bookstore. So I'm going to guess, and so basically what happened is the person at the cash did what they were trained to do. They followed the process, and the process was, enter the price of the book into the system, right? Usually that's done by just simply scanning the barcode. And then you enter in the type of sale, so you press cash and you're typing the amount of money that they've done. So let's say this person was paying with a $100 bill. So they probably typed in $100 and accidentally hit another 0, pressed enter on their POS system, and it came back and it says, here's the book for $39.95 plus tax, and by the way, the change comes out to $900 and some odd dollars. I'm thinking, a little bit of awareness here might go, there's a mistake. This doesn't feel right. So yeah, there is processes. We do need to follow them. They will help support us, but we also need to, raise that awareness. All right. Now, to be truly effective, we need to monitor and we need to control. So we're talking about, keeping our projects on track. We need to have both of those in play here. So yes, we need to monitor, we need to be aware, which is kind of really what awareness is about, but then we also have to take action on that and control. So my little puppy friend here, this is Rondi. He's a helper dog in training. He's actually, I think in this picture, he was about 9 months old, and that little pink doggy biscuit in front of his nose is his absolutely very favorite treat. So he's showing an extreme amount of control here, even for a little puppy. And then, yeah, they upped the ante and put the extra kibbles on his paws. And yeah, just a beautiful picture. I love it. He was allowed to eat all the treats moments after this picture was taken. So an amazing amount of control. So, all right. So where are we at? For good leadership, you're going to need all 4 pillars. We've taken a look at awareness today, and awareness is all about, where am I at? What's going on? Am I truly aware of what this big picture is? And, what is my real situation? And in terms of flying, we call it situational awareness. And when you have that loss of situational awareness, it's actually extremely insidious, because you don't really realize that you've lost it. And that's kind of the big, paradox here. So when you're aware that things aren't right, that's actually a really good day. When you're not aware that things aren't right, that's where the real danger zone lies. So, step back, take that step back, look from the outside perspective, perhaps ask a third party to, take that look for you, or like we saw in the video, let's go to a different camera angle. Let's, really step back and take a look at the larger picture. And this is a lot of what's behind the PMI's, process improvement. And when we talk about control processes, we're not only controlling this particular project being on time and on budget, but we're also controlling the process. So am I filling in those forms? Am I doing that? And in doing so, am I also getting the results that I should be getting? Okay. And pay attention to those small indicators that are going to tell you things aren't quite right. All right. So just to kind of finish this out, again, come back to our opening thought. The less we know about something, the more certain we are that we know it all. We don't even question our own behavior. So I'm going to put it to you that you should be questioning your own behavior. You should be stepping back and saying, do I know it all? And what else is out there? And embracing that counterintuitive. This will help us deal with some of those biases, such as confirmation bias and optimism bias that we tend to have. And really, questioning our behavior, questioning, do we know it all? Do we have all the facts? Do we have all the data? And, how about if we apply some quick common sense? Okay, so Reg, thank you. I've just got a note from Reg that is going to raise our awareness a little bit, courtesy of Wikipedia. Printing of the $1,000 note ceased in 2000. The denomination was withdrawn in the advice of the Solicitor General and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as it was often used for money laundering and organized crime. Beautifully said. Thanks, Reg. So we've just increased our awareness. We now know that the $1,000 bill is no longer in circulation. So when you're at the university bookstore next week and a student attempts to purchase something with a $1,000 bill, and you need to get a hold of 9 $100 bills for change, we can be pretty assured that that $1,000 bill shouldn't be out there. So beautifully done. Thank you, sir.